tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
For those 2,500 people that we lost this year, we need to continue to this work.
The province pledges to expand efforts to help people get treatment and recovery after a record number of toxic drug deaths. Plus, fake intimate images. We take a closer look at the dark side of artificial intelligence. And
what makes your honey so good?
I think it's so good because it's from the Kootenays.
they're buzzing in Creston. Some BC beekeepers are now champions of honey.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. One day after BC's coroner announced a record number of toxic drug deaths last year, the Premier has announced he's expanding efforts to help people access treatment and recovery. Michelle Morton has more on the push and the push back.
For those 2,500 people that we lost this year, for the 13,000 before that, since the public health emergency was declared, we need to continue to this work. We need to continue to work together, and we will continue to do this work together. Thanks very much.
Premier David Eby announcing part of that work is more treatment and recovery services for people facing addiction in BC. He says the province is nearly doubling the number of beds it previously committed to, which is now 180. Around 100 of those are already open in several communities.
The reason we were able to move so quickly to get beds open in partnership with you is that the majority of these beds were previously private beds, which were only available if people paid thousands of dollars. Now they're freely available to British Columbians without fees, able to access high-quality treatment that previously they were not able to afford.
He says the rest of the roughly 80 beds are set to open up by this summer. The province has said it's investing $73 million over 3 years to pay for these beds. Advocates say they're already noticing a difference with faster response times for those wanting detox.
We see up to 900 people a day sometimes at the overdose prevention site that we work at. And sometimes people come in and they say, I want to get into detox as soon as possible. Please help me get in today.
Sarah Blythe is the executive director at the overdose prevention site located on the downtown east side. She applauds the announcement of more beds made available for those looking for help. And often she sees her clients get the care they want within a day. But there are still challenges.
It'd be great to have intake 24 hours so that when people come in at any point of time and within 24 hours, any kind of consistency in services so that people know when the intakes happen and that they're not at different times.
What's not coming is expanded access to safe supply. This despite BC's chief coroner's recommendation to expand safer supply and make the drugs available prescription-free. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, the provincial government says it will appeal a BC Supreme Court ruling that temporarily blocked a law that bans drug use in most public places. The act would make it illegal to use drugs close to playgrounds, sports fields, beaches, and parks, as well as within 6 meters of bus stops. The province is citing 6 possible grounds for appeal, claiming Chief Justice Christopher Hinkson's order was too broad and his conclusions were, quote, not firmly grounded on the evidence before him. It argues the toxic drug crisis and addiction issues ought to be treated as a health matter and not a criminal one. A 25-year-old man from Surrey has been identified as the victim of a deadly shooting outside a busy restaurant in Burnaby earlier this week. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team says Johnson Viet On Do was killed near Kingsway and Denby, just east of Royal Oak, late Tuesday night. Police say Do did not have a criminal record, though the shooting appears targeted. The investigators are still working to determine a motive and whether it's related to ongoing gang violence. Police have also released information about a suspect vehicle. IHED says surveillance video shows a silver 2010 Buick Enclave fleeing the scene. If you've seen this vehicle, you're asked to contact police. An Ontario man has been arrested and charged in relation to a deadly shooting in Surrey in 2022. 23-year-old Yusuf Kontos is now charged with first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Last February, police responded to a shooting near an elementary school. They found 2 victims wounded inside a vehicle. A 24-year-old Surrey man died from his injuries. A second victim, a 20-year-old woman, survived. The suspect was believed to be living in Delta at the time. On Tuesday, he was arrested in Ontario. We're learning more about that deadly helicopter crash north of Terrace on Monday afternoon. The family of an Italian tourist who was killed in the crash says one of the other 3 people who died was the helicopter pilot. 4 others were critically hurt, one of which was the mountain guide. The helicopter and pilot were leased by Northern Escape Heli-Skiing from Skyline Helicopters in Kelowna. The companies, Mounties and BC Coroner, have not officially released the names of the dead or injured yet. After more than 30 days on the picket lines, transit workers in Comox and Campbell River may be headed back to work soon. The union says it has reached a tentative agreement, but services will not return for at least another week. Claire Palmer reports on the impact to people trying to get around.
These striking bus drivers may soon be back behind the wheel, potentially putting an end to job action that has stretched on for more than a month.
This has really affected the community, and we really feel sorry for them because, you know, this is our first strike ever in the Valley, and there's so many students and workers and seniors and people that rely on our service.
The union says there is no word yet on when employees will be ratifying the tentative deal reached Thursday, which means transit services are still many days away from returning to normal. For this group of diversely abled adults at L'Arche Comox Valley, the return of services can't come soon enough. The strike has been especially difficult for these residents, limiting access to vital social activities and, in turn, their independence.
They no longer are independent, and so they have to rely on others. And so we work very hard to try and make sure that there's someone available to drive them to and from where they need to go. But if that weren't the case, then they would be stuck, because not everybody has family or relatives or friends who can fill in that gap.
This Comox resident says she sponsors a Ukrainian family who has been scrambling to find their own transportation.
And it's challenging. It's challenging for them because they really want to be independent.
She says bus services in the area were unreliable prior to the strike and hopes the new agreement will bring with it an improved transit system.
And it's challenging organizing who can be available when to drive and who can do pickups as well. So it really impacts them, and I think it impacts their dignity. They really love being independent.
The union representing striking transit workers says the key issue is insufficient wages, which it says has led to recruitment and retention issues.
We're hoping to try to get better scheduling and better wages so we can encourage some young people into the industry, because there's a lot of us retiring over the next few years and we need new drivers. So.
Striking workers say they have received an outpouring of support from the community, despite the challenges the job action has created. The union says the tentative agreement addresses many of the employees' concerns and will be presented to the workers in the coming days. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Comox.
The province is urging Surrey's mayor to accept the police service budget proposal to spend $142 million to transition police forces in the city.
The transition is the law of the province, and so there is a path forward here. And I think it's time for the city of Surrey to recognize that, to move forward. And this is in the best interests in terms of public safety in the city of Surrey, and indeed the province.
The Police Services Board presented the numbers this morning, saying they align with the city's financial forecast. The board aims to spend 42% of all the money available for policing in Surrey. Mayor Brenda Locke has been fighting to keep the RCMP, saying the municipal service is too expensive. But Farnworth says that transition is funded and approved. Meanwhile, plans to dissolve Vancouver's elected park board are forging ahead. A new transition team made of several Vancouver councillors, staff and community volunteers will give recommendations to City Council on new processes for park and recreation services over the next 6 months. The city is asking the province to dissolve the elected board and have it report to city councillors. Dozens of former park board commissioners have slammed the plan. If you notice a bad chemical smell around the Burnaby area over the next few days, again, heads up, it might be again from the Parkland refinery. An air quality bulletin has been issued for Metro Vancouver's northeast and northwest regions. The refinery is starting up its operations after a problem with its facility on Sunday. It's warning of possible foul odors and potential exposure to contaminants. But is it harmful to your health? We asked the head of respiratory medicine at UBC.
just because you smell it doesn't mean it's truly toxic. That's just one thing to say, and it's not to dismiss people, but I do need to say that sometimes we're aware of things that are below truly toxic levels, and I just don't want broad alarm. On the other hand, as I said before, without knowing the true levels, we're making educated guesses, and that's not ideal.
Over the weekend, Metro Vancouver did say the contaminants did not reach toxic levels. It's going to take the refinery another 4 weeks to return to normal. The company says the goal is to have minimal impact on nearby communities. A new report from a U.S. environmental advocacy group says tax incentives are fueling a surge of exploratory mining in northern BC. The report says this surge makes a handful of investors richer, but as Katrin Pilkington tells us, they say it also comes with costs to taxpayers and the environment.
This is the Transboundary Watershed. Over 4 major rivers flow between British Columbia and Alaska in this area. A new report says the promise of gold underneath the ground here is drawing a flurry of mining exploration. The report is by the Environmental Investigation Agency, an international environmental advocacy group. It says the interest in mining is being driven by venture capital and government incentives, and claims that raising money for mining exploration is becoming profitable in and of itself. C.T. Harry is a scientist with the Environmental Investigation Agency. He says governments are gambling with public money with no guarantee of a payoff.
It serves to move the risk that should be private onto the public in public funds in the private hands.
Without these exploration projects, we don't have the mines that provide us with the metals and minerals that are necessary for a low carbon future. If we don't explore, we don't find. And if we don't find, we don't have the copper for wires, we don't have the silver for solar panels, we don't have the metal for steel.
The report centers on northern BC, but rivers and watersheds cross borders. The report says shared watersheds can mean the impacts of industry are felt across many territories. It also raises concerns about a flurry of exploration in ecologically sensitive areas, some still covered by glaciers. It recommends governments ensure that mines could be feasible before approving exploration projects. Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Iris Medavi joins us for a first look at the weather. And man, you were right, damp.
Damp. Going to continue to be damp, going to continue to be warm. We're going to keep warming up, and it means that as we have actually possibly 2 Pineapple Expresses, it's just an atmospheric river that comes to us from the tropics around Hawaii, we're going to see really this really minimal snowpack that we have already sort of be decimated as freezing levels get extremely high, and we see lots of precipitation fall almost entirely as rain across the south coast. So over the last 24 hours, what we've seen, sort of a teaser for what's to come. Now, if we take a look at the moisture, you can see right now we have one stream of moisture heading into parts of Washington. We're going to get a little frontal system that breaks off of that over the next 48 hours, so bringing us some rain likely Friday night into Saturday morning. And then the next one is what really hits BC. You can see Sunday, we're going to get a very heavy stream of moisture that's going to last at least 24 hours. And then after this one runs off, we see another one come in. Now, this model is showing it coming quite a bit further south than some of the others. I can't show you the other ones on this map, but you can imagine this could be quite a bit higher as well, potentially bringing us even more moisture. But again, this is almost a week out, so still remains to be seen where exactly that lands in the province. And then if we take a look at our accumulation totals, this is the next 48 hours, what we usually look at. You can see plenty of rain coming just in that time. But actually, if we take this off and we start fresh from Saturday to Wednesday, when we're expecting to see those atmospheric rivers come in, much, much heavier rainfall. So we'll take a closer look at this and what it means for the freezing levels and the snowpack later this hour.
Sounds good. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Heads up, helicopter parents. A new study says parents ought to encourage their children to take risks and engage in rough and tumble fun outdoors to boost their physical and mental health, even if that means breaking out the Band-Aids once in a while. Here's more from Christine Birak.
For parents, this advice may be eye-opening. After spending decades supervising and trying to protect kids from any and all injuries, the Canadian Pediatric Society is telling doctors one way of dealing with rising obesity, anxiety, and behavioral issues is to get kids back outside and let them take risks while they're playing, even if that means falling down, even if that means getting hurt.
There is a balance between allowing kids to get out there, be autonomous, try new things, challenge themselves, and we know that there will be a risk of injury.
So what is risky play? Experts say it's things like playing at heights. That means climbing, jumping, balancing, playing at speed, biking at high speed, sliding and running. Now this one might irk some parents. Play involving tools, so supervised activities like using an axe, saw, or knife. So things like building a clubhouse or wood carving. Of course, this needs to be age appropriate, but the list also includes wrestling, play fighting, and allowing kids to explore.
You know, this isn't about letting a child run into a busy street or play unsupervised near rough water. You know, those are hazards.
She also points out there's a difference between risk and hazard. Risky play does not mean ignoring evidence-based safety measures like bike helmets, life jackets, and safety gates. It does not mean leaving kids unsupervised in potentially hazardous situations like busy roadways and rough waters. Doctors say this is about age-appropriate fun.
It's a shift from helicopter parenting, right? And over-parenting and over-scheduling. So I think it's healthier for kids. It's better to build resilience, belief in themselves and their abilities.
Experts say parents can also reframe the way they talk about risk with their kids. So next time you're at the playground, instead of saying, "Be careful, are you sure that's a good idea?" try saying, "Do you feel stable up there? What's your plan for getting down?" Experts insist instead of raising doubts and fears, parents can raise awareness and problem solve with their kids. Experts insist this isn't about moving away from safety. It's a shift towards making kids as safe as necessary. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
Music fans rejoice. The Juno Awards are returning to Vancouver in 2025 after 6 years. The Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences announced the award show will take place at Rogers Arena on March 30th of next year, with the usual Juno Week festivities happening the week before. This year, the 53rd Juno Awards are taking place in Halifax, with Nelly Furtado returning as host on March 24th, and you can watch it all here on CBC. Deepfake intimate images of Taylor Swift flooded on social today, raising questions of legality about a new breed of pornography becoming even more realistic. We're going to speak with an AI expert and a lawyer on the new legal and ethical frontiers of deepfakes. Stick around. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream tonight. As the saying goes, one man's trash is another one's treasure. Certainly the case for an Edmonton artist when he spotted a Facebook Marketplace ad selling 6,000 oil paintings. Emily Fitzpatrick reports on how it has helped him on his path to becoming an artist.
Landscapes, like seascapes, mountainscapes. I got portraits of cats. I got a whole clown series.
6,000 paintings, once piled high in this storage locker, now take up most of Josh Harnack's studio.
You know, there's so much potential, especially with this mailbox opening up.
His hobby of breathing new life into thrift store paintings has reached a new level. Now, little by little, he's working his way through these pieces, collaborating with forgotten artists by putting his own spin on it.
It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're looking at clouds and you try to make shapes out of the clouds. I do the same thing, but with like a painting, where I just try to see the shapes and go, oh, that could be this or this could be that. And then I dive in.
They could have hung in dental offices or hotels, as most of the art was painted in Korea for mass production. But now at the hands of Harnack, a branch has become a tentacle, a hat, a bird's nest.
Taking these paintings that have kind of had their heyday on people's walls, and now to give them a whole second life that they can maybe live on somebody's wall for another 30 or 40 or 50 years is really exciting.
This exercise in creativity, adding touches of surrealism to realism, has been invigorating.
I get a lot of joy out of trying to figure out how I can add something to the scene and to their lighting and composition, so it's kind of a seamless addition where you wouldn't notice it right away until you do that double take.
Harnack will be displaying some of the pieces at the Roxy Theatre, where he hopes they'll be snapped up, rehoming these landscapes to living rooms. Emily Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Edmonton.
This week, we are taking a close look at artificial intelligence. The technology is getting better and can be used in many different ways, from advances in health to art. It also comes with a dark side. It can be used to create fake nude photos. Just today, X, formerly known as Twitter, was flooded with AI-generated intimate images of Taylor Swift. One post was viewed 45 million times and had some 24,000 reports. And just last month, parents at a Winnipeg school were notified that altered, explicit photos of female students were being shared online. So how does this technology work, and what legal recourse do people have, if anything? Kristen Thomason is an assistant professor at UBC with an expertise in AI and law, and Steve DiPola is an artificial intelligence professor at SFU. We really appreciate you both being here. Thanks for doing this. Steve, I want to start with you. How has AI come so far in making images like this?
Yes, it's not only come far, but it's going out of the kind of the research or even the dark web where everyone can be doing this now. But similar to ChatGPT, which people are used to, that system looked at almost all words and statistically tries to put it together. We're now on the other side, the visual side of everything. And now you can, once it knows all that, you can kind of regurgitate it back to what was stills, but now we're seeing is videos.
And without trying to explain to people, we don't want to give them a how-to guide on this, it is getting easier, right?
Yes, and there are now just tools that are out there. What happened in Winnipeg is closer to the older kind of face swapping. So that means it would be a video, and getting someone's face, you could put that on it. It looks like the Taylor Swift incident is a kind of a more modern thing of, as you would do with ChatGPT, you would type some things in, and just because the system knows about that, you're getting completely generated as opposed to just taking imagery from video.
Right. Kristen, what legal recourse, if any, are there? What legal protections are in place right now?
Well, we don't have a lot of laws, with one exception, notable for us in British Columbia. But we don't have a lot of laws that deal specifically with generated or artificial synthetic images. And that's largely because a lot of the privacy and criminal laws that do deal with, for example, non-consensual distribution of intimate images or invasion of privacy were created before, some of them not even that long ago, but still before deepfake technology was more widely available, and this was a real issue. BC has a new law coming into effect at the end of the month, the Intimate Images Protection Act, which does include altered photos. So that will allow for more explicit application to this kind of issue. But again, it only applies to distribution. So I think privacy laws, my thought as a legal scholar is that privacy laws are designed to deal with exactly this kind of dignitary, autonomy-based harm, dealing with control over our bodies and our images, and so ought to apply in these kinds of situations. And so I do think we have laws that will apply here, but we're waiting for that clarity from courts and maybe even from legislators to say this definitely does apply here, and then there are some legal mechanisms.
And will the law apply if, for example, they find out that whoever's producing this stuff is across the world?
That does raise important jurisdictional issues. There's actually a range of issues here that are raised by this kind of conduct. There's the individual harm, and the fact that the image is already up on the internet makes, not only maybe a legal action to deal with that, perhaps sometimes through criminal law, but also getting compensation. I mean, it's already out there. So getting some kind of compensation for the loss that's happened. Also having the image taken down, and that's something else that the new BC legislation does offer, is a streamlined possibility for getting images removed from the internet. But then also dealing with the collective harm that each of us, and this is a gender-based harm, so
Yes.
each of us, especially women and young people, seeing these kinds of incidents happen, have this concern or fear that our privacy can be invaded in this way. That's a harm the law does not deal with. And then, of course, there's the international dimension, and that's where the law, I think, needs to really focus in on social media companies that make it possible to share this so easily, as well as the companies that design these tools that make it, easy to create these images. There needs to be more mechanisms for responsibility there.
And on the technical front, Steve, what sort of coordination can there be between these companies, and if they are not allowing it, perhaps just benignly facilitating the creation of these images? What do they need to do?
And surely they have filters already, and we're seeing it again on things like ChatGPT, where there's things you can't talk about. Officially, they have filters about nudity, and there's just so many ways around them, unfortunately. I think one of the technologies is to be able to a different AI to recognize it and take it on. With all this, I think we're trying to do a better job with AI than we did with social media. So I do want to bring up from a technology standpoint that most of this problem is that X left it up, let's just say, and less the issue of people painting things, or in this case, painting terrible things, if we call it that, is less the problem of companies somehow putting it on their storefronts. In the old days, we would never let that happen, and somehow. So I think some kind of standard, I think the big technology is to get to it and take it down quickly.
Are we moving too fast on not so much on the images themselves, and certainly these are terrible, but just certainly on this technology, on how fast it is actually developing? Kristen, I'll start with you on that one.
I would say it's actually not the technology that is causing these problems. It's creating new dynamics to the problems. But these kinds of, gender-based privacy intrusions, especially intimate image creation and distribution, has existed for a long time. Where we're not moving fast enough is on dealing with the root problem, which is misogyny, sexism. Like, why are people creating these images in the first place? That's really where we're moving far too slowly. The technology, though, no doubt is moving quickly, and it makes for challenges for courts, for judges, for legislators, to ensure that the law can be applicable and can be easy to identify as applicable. So that is something that, it would be great if our provincial and federal governments were really, cognizant of this and taking action. But I don't think we can easily slow the pace of technology without some serious dealing with the social and the legal side of things.
Some more safeguards. Steve, same question to you in terms of the speed of this happening.
Yes, and remember, these tools are moving very quick, and they're amazing, we'll just say, in the speed of what they can do. But that's just as much for good as it is for bad. And the health aspects, the self-driving cars, again, I like to say if self-driving, the AI in self-driving cars alone could bring down car crashes, which is just something we all deal with, say 50 to even 75%. That would be the greatest gift that a technology has given humanity since medicine or something like that. So this is the issue. It's a double-sided thing.
And lastly, to both of you, Kristen, I'll start with you. They've gone after Taylor Swift. She is a person with immense resources and immense power and immense influence. They've shot at somebody, perhaps, if I can use that phrase, who's very prominent. What recourse do you think she can use and leverage in order to perhaps fight this?
Well, I mean, having financial resources is important, but it just goes to the point that this kind of harm is, in a way, a death by a thousand cuts, if I can quote her. We see this happening to somebody so powerful with such privilege in society and is targeted nonetheless, that it makes it very difficult for the rest of us to feel comfortable, which is where, law as just one sliver of a social response can play a valuable role, at least if you know that there are mechanisms. There's a way for me to get compensation. There's an easy way, like in BC soon, for me to have the images taken down. That's so important. Not all of us have a team of 10 million fans who are going to do that for us when Twitter fails or X fails. And so, having those kind of legislative responses is one part of responding to this kind of issue.
And Steve, same question to you.
And when you think about this, we say, why did X do this? Why couldn't they do something quicker? Is this really, as a community of peoples, do we really want these kind of corporations making this decision? Here we are with electronics all around it, all around us, and there's a label on every piece from the standards to say you will not get electrocuted based on this. What we really have to do as a people is actually come up with the standards of what we want and what we don't. And then you could imagine different levels of that, and X or Google would say, oh, we're at level 5 if you use us. Well, so I think we have to realize that we, the people, need just take this technology and do it ourselves and not assume this is really a government and a community thing. So I think the same AI can actually be used kind of by us to regulate this better.
You've given us both a lot, or all of us, a lot to think about. We really appreciate your time and expertise. Kristen Thomas and Steve DiPolo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And as AI grows and strengthens, there are many questions about our future and whether AI eventually outgrows humans. We've heard that scenario and starts teaching itself. This is called Singularity, and our friends at CBC Kids News have more.
Hey everyone! I'm on this mountain to explain what the singularity is. Trust me, it'll all make sense. This is Can Explains the Singularity. Think of this mountain I'm on as a timeline of human history. Snow represents technology and the improvements we've made over time. Humans have pushed technology forward. In the 1940s, we created this awesome invention known as the electronic computer. You might have heard of it. Humans have continued to push that snowball forward, helping it get a lot bigger and faster as it rolls. Since computers were invented, people began thinking about this idea called the singularity. The singularity is a point in time when artificial intelligence becomes smarter and faster than humans. It could look like this. AI becomes so smart that it no longer needs humans to help push it along. AI could then become independent enough to learn and improve itself without our help, eventually creating an even better AI, which then creates an even better AI, and so on and so on. The AI could become what's called super intelligent, meaning smarter than humans, even smarter than humans could possibly imagine. But wouldn't that cause a technology avalanche? Something too out of our control? A computer smarter than a human? Okay. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. First, let's explain when this might happen. Alright, so the mountain is a timeline of human history, right? So when could the AI snowball pass us? Or when could the singularity happen? Some experts think it could happen 30 to 40 years from now. Or a lot sooner. Or not at all. Maybe artificial intelligence will remain how it is. Specialized and smart, but not smarter than humans. But what if it continues to grow and get smarter, improving itself without humans? What would the singularity even look like? Well, these are all theories, but some experts think AI could replace or surpass humans. What? Maybe even becoming self-aware, or living the same way we do. Others fear that AI could leave us behind or even eliminate us. Maybe, but many scientists and governments are talking about putting safeguards up around AI advancements. The experts that CBC Kids News spoke to agreed that the scariest possibility for the singularity might not be sci-fi robots or snow monsters trying to take over the world. It's misinformation and disinformation created by AI that humans can't spot or stop. Like, what if we couldn't spot the real snow from the fake stuff? Another theory is that artificial intelligence could be used to change ourselves, combining with us to make super intelligent humans. It could be used for good or evil. We don't really know yet. Or it could be a bunch of small individual developments, like snowflakes instead of snowballs. For example, AI could become super intelligent at certain jobs or roles, but it's not good at everything. Or it could be nothing at all. With all these ideas swirling around the singularity, will we ever know? The honest answer is no one knows yet. The possibilities are endless. And that's why it's called the singularity. It's a mathematical term for infinity, which is unimaginable, and a term for the center of a black hole, which we can't see past. So now we know what the singularity is. A time and place when AI grows to become smarter than humans. So what's next? All the experts I spoke to said knowledge is power. If kids want to be in control of the future with AI, it's about getting out there and learning so that we can steer the snowball in the direction we want our futures to go. It's a lot to take in, but I'm gonna go enjoy my hot chocolate now. For CBC Kids News, I'm Ainara Aline.
The world of hockey is waiting after news leaked that 5 former junior players have been asked to surrender to police. What's next in that investigation? Next.
After nearly 30 years as a mechanic, Larry Arsenault knows his way around most cars, but when it comes to electric vehicles, not so much.
It's just a new challenge for everything. It's like, you know, you go from a wood stove to heat pumps. It's just like anything else. It's new. We got to get trained on it.
He says there wasn't a place close by for him to get that training until now. A new program starting at Holland College next month will teach mechanics to work on electric vehicles and particularly their high voltage parts.
From what I've been reading, there's pretty high currency that can cause, you know, damage to yourself, or some of the equipment that we already have is incapable of working on them. So it'd be just nice to know what we're going to need and the challenges that it's going to take to learn the stuff.
It can be super dangerous still without.
This isn't a full diploma program. It's a special 5-day course for experienced mechanics. Larry Arsenault's boss was quick to sign him up.
It was a no-brainer for me. It's no secret that the industry is shifting that way. That's what the government's pushing for. That's what a lot of the population is pushing for. So as that demand continues to increase, it only makes sense for us, for a business perspective, to develop the skills to be able to service the market as it grows.
The course is actually free for students. The federal and provincial governments are funding it. They also paid for the electric vehicles you see here and the tools needed to work on them.
A combustion engine to an electric motor is tremendously different. There's probably a little bit of apprehension amongst the industry to work on an EV or a hybrid. Just a little bit of unknown, a little bit of fear maybe. That's what we're hoping to alleviate and have everyone comfortable working on these vehicles, because that's what we're going to see on the road more and more all the time.
To start, the college is offering the course to a few small groups. It also plans to include some of the more basic EV training in its regular automotive technology program. Alex McIsaac, CBC News, Summerside.
The hockey world is reeling after a series of recent developments. First, numerous NHL teams announced some players were leaving indefinitely. And yesterday, the Globe and Mail reported 5 former World Junior players were told to surrender themselves to police in London, Ontario, to face sexual assault charges. Karen Pauls has more on what might come next.
A proud moment when Canada won the 2018 World Junior Championships. But since then, revelations of a $3.5 million out-of-court settlement by Hockey Canada after a young woman alleged she was sexually assaulted by 8 members of that team. Police have opened, closed, and reopened that investigation. And now, the Globe and Mail is reporting that 5 players have been asked to surrender themselves to face sexual assault charges. CBC News has not independently verified the report.
These are individuals who they know who they are, and the warrant's not going to go away. They're going to be arrested. Either they can walk into the police station and do that, or ultimately the police will come and find them.
This former assistant Crown prosecutor, now a defense lawyer, is not connected to this case.
And they'll be read their rights to counsel, given their caution, allowed the opportunity to speak with a lawyer, and then I would imagine released with a court date and some conditions at that point in time.
5 members of the 2018 World Junior team have taken leaves of absence from their professional teams in the last week, but no evidence has been made public linking them to any of the allegations, and the teams aren't saying much.
We will respond appropriately when the outcomes of the investigations are made public. The NHL has been very clear that teams should refer all investigation-related questions to them.
The NHL is doing its own investigation, but hasn't yet released its findings, leaving teams and players under a cloud.
There's a lot of pressure on the National Hockey League to condemn this type of event, but it hasn't been proven yet. And to a certain degree, they've been condemned. They are not playing hockey and won't be playing hockey until this case is resolved, and unless it's resolved in their favor.
And that could be years. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Neighbors of the security guard facing charges in Tuesday's shootout at Edmonton City Hall are now speaking out. And as Julia Wong shows us, police are poring over a video the suspect made that's now circulating online.
In this quiet apartment complex, neighbors of a man accused of opening fire at Edmonton City Hall trying to process the act of violence.
Basically, my interaction with him was just hellos. It seemed very normal. There was no weird activity.
Tuesday morning, police say Bazani Sarvar lit several devices they believe to be Molotov cocktails inside City Hall and fired multiple rounds at random from a long gun. The building placed on lockdown, causing terrifying moments for those stuck inside, including a class of grade 1 students. Police say the suspect dropped his weapon and surrendered to a security guard. The 28-year-old, also a security guard, is charged with 6 explosives and firearm offenses. In a wide-ranging, sometimes sporadic 4-minute video posted by the social media account YEG Wave circulating online, Sarvar details a long list of grievances with society, saying he wants to make the world better. It is not clear where or when the video was recorded. Does that video align with the man that you know?
No. In all of the way, no. As I've mentioned earlier, not in a million years. This is just out of the blue.
Emmanuel Cruz lives beside Sarvar and says they spoke often. He and other neighbors say Sarvar is married with kids.
All I can say is really good guy. Like sample every time I went out, and we saw each other, he just always asked, how's the kid, how's the family.
Did you ever see him with a gun, or did he ever talk about a gun?
No, not at all. I know, again, he's a security guard, but other than that's all I know from him. But I've never seen him with a gun, not get violent at all.
Sarvar made a very brief court appearance Thursday through video conference. He wore an orange jumpsuit, showed little facial expression, and did not make any comments. His bail hearing was postponed to next Friday. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
At 6:43, there's a live shot of the inner harbor of Victoria and the provincial legislature. Plenty of rain on the south coast from the mainland to the island, and much more on the way. Darius has your BC-wide forecast right after this.
no matter how many medals Tyler McGregor won. The reward was never equal to his Olympic counterparts. Now that's changing.
You're not making a whole lot of money doing this. And so I think for any Paralympian, it allows you to focus on what you can do right now to be your best.
We are absolutely thrilled, delighted to announce today the Paralympic Performance Recognition Program.
Starting this summer, Canadian Paralympians will be given the same amount of money as Olympic athletes for making the podium at the 2024 Paralympic Games and each of the games after.
It is proof how much Paralympic sport has grown.
$20,000 for winning gold, $15,000 for silver, and $10,000 for bronze.
For me personally, it's a huge motivator.
Paralympic silver medalist Priscilla Gagné says the money helps, but this is about being treated fairly.
People see you differently. You're not as valued as maybe the Olympians.
Canadian athletes started to get money for medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, but Paralympians were left out. This donor is trying to fill the gap. He put up $4 million, half of the money needed to pay Paralympic medalists.
The stories are so compelling and they're so human and emotional, and I can't get them out of my mind.
Even though Ottawa is also contributing $2 million, the Canadian Paralympic Committee still has to turn to generous donors to raise more.
It's not appropriate anymore for us to have 2 or 3 different tiered systems for how people participate in sport.
Back on the ice, McGregor says it's the beginning of change.
This helps create that virtuous cycle that allows us to continue to build and elevate the level of Paralympic sport here in Canada.
A hope that Paralympians will finally get the respect and pay they deserve. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Colombia is declaring ongoing wildfires a natural disaster. About 25 blazes are burning right now. This month alone, firefighters have doused 200. Flames were visible this week from the capital of Bogota. The disaster declaration will funnel more money to the firefight. Colombia is in the middle of its dry season, one that this year's El Nino weather pattern is making worse. And a study published yesterday says climate change is behind record drought across the Amazon region. Our science and climate specialist Darius Madavi joins us now with a forecast. You've been watching the weather situation in South America closely. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I read the report from yesterday, and it was very strong. I mean, they were looking at the difference between what climate change contributed and what El Nino contributed, because El Nino events do usually bring a drier and warmer season to the Amazon basin. But in this case, they found that it was mostly the result of climate change. If you take a look here, you can see they're using the U.S. drought monitoring system here, which means that anything that's in this dark red color is pretty much the worst drought that's ever been recorded in that region. Top 2%, which for many of these places means the worst yet recorded. Even even this red color that's also very common across this map means the top 5% of the worst drought situations. I should say bottom 5% of worst drought situations. It was largely driven, first of all, by a record low amount of precipitation, no matter which data set the researchers looked at. That was half driven by climate change and half due to El Nino. But when it comes to the temperatures, which were record high, no matter what data set you look at, they found that was pretty much entirely driven by climate change. And the fact that this was a 50 to 100-year drought event, in the future, if climate change does continue and we hit 2 degrees Celsius of warming, this is what we're going to see pretty much every 12 to 13 years. Now, terrible drought situation happening here, expected to continue. This was from June to November of last year. But here in BC, not looking so dry. We're getting very wet. This is the atmospheric river events that we were looking at earlier, these Pineapple Expresses, one landing on Sunday, potentially one landing mid next week as well. But for what's happening in the next couple days, it's going to be just a frontal system over the next 48 hours, still bringing a decent amount of rainfall as freezing levels are extremely high and continuing to rise into next week. This is terrible resolution, but you can see that freezing level is going to be very high into early next week and then maybe dropping midweek, but it remains to be seen what exactly happens there. Now, in terms of accumulation over the next 48 hours, I've split this into two pieces because you can see plenty of rain coming, very little snow, but some still in the peaks. But once we get past this point, I'm just going to take off the snow entirely, splitting this up starting from now this Saturday into next Wednesday. If we look at those accumulation amounts, quite a lot. Now, I split this up because I want to not stress people out too much about the numbers because this is over an entire week, so not too much to worry about yet. But we do have some nasty conditions, lots of rain coming to Vancouver no matter where you are. And then in terms of conditions, this is mostly chances in the interior, but along the coast, pretty much guaranteed rain. And here in Vancouver, nothing but rain in the days ahead, including a Pineapple Express.
We're getting used to it. We should be, at least. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
A Saskatchewan cyclist is gearing up for a huge competition. Ariel Kelly is training in Edmonton, then will travel to the U.S. for the World BMX Championships. Did I mention she's 9 years old? The CBC's Aishwarya Duda caught up with her.
Ariel Kelly grew up in the small town of Dana, about an hour's drive east of Saskatoon. These days, you can find her training hard in Edmonton for the BMX World Championships.
We are here at Riders Ready BMX Indoor BMX Track, and I'm here to practice for the Worlds in South Carolina.
Kelly's journey began with her grandpa, Lowell Ruda, who taught her how to ride her grandma's old pink bike. After that, he started coaching her, and soon she was hitting the tracks in Warman and competing in her first race.
I was mesmerized at first sight, and I tried it out, I think, the next week. I found out I was really good at BMX, and I wanted to do that until I was really old.
BMX riding runs in the family. Kelly's grandmother was once the top female BMX rider in Canada after winning the title at Expo 86 in Vancouver. Kelly has been racking up medals in Saskatchewan, Quebec, and Alberta. She and her grandpa traveled to Saskatoon to practice at one of the 3 BMX clubs in the province. But the track is outside, so during the winter, they have to drive to a facility in Edmonton to ride.
We have a very short racing season, probably the shortest racing season in the world. In Saskatchewan, we only have 3 tracks to where we can get riders from to race.
Ruda says even though he's paying for his granddaughter to get to the United States and compete, it's her drive and ambition to be #1 that's propelling her forward.
I think it's endless. I think the sky's the limit. I think she has what it takes to get to the top of this sport.
Kelly's goals in the sport are as clear as her talent on the track.
I hope to get first in the world and represent Saskatchewan and our country.
The competition takes place in May. Kelly is the youngest of 6 Saskatchewan kids taking part. And on top of winning, she says she hopes to show others how cool and fun the sport can be. Aishwarya Duda, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Coming up, a sweet story with a lot of buzz. We hear from an award-winning beekeeper from Creston. That's next.
Have you heard the term greenhouse gases? Let's break it down. First, let's talk about greenhouses. You know those glass buildings that are used to grow plants? Those glass walls trap the sun's heat. so plants can stay warm, even in the winter. That's pretty much what greenhouse gases do for Earth. They're actually a natural part of the Earth's atmosphere. Think of greenhouse gases like a blanket. They wrap around our planet, keeping it warm so that we can live on it. But hear me out. You've heard Goldilocks, right? It can't be too hot or too cold. The conditions have to be just right. Because of human activities in the last century, there are more greenhouse gases being released into the atmosphere, disrupting the balance. And that means more heat is getting trapped near the Earth's surface, causing temperatures to rise. And yes, you guessed it, the unusual increase of the Earth's surface temperature is called global warming. So, what exactly are the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere anyway? Well, let's break down 5 main types. First, carbon dioxide. It's the greenhouse gas with the biggest total impact on climate change. Most of the CO2 in the atmosphere has come from burning fossil fuels, so coal, gas, and oil. And then we have methane. It's released when fossil fuels are extracted from the earth, but it's also released by livestock, like cows. Next up is nitrous oxide. This gas can be released during industrial activities and from burning fossil fuels or solid waste. Then we've got fluorinated gases. There are different kinds, but the ones you might be most familiar with are in your fridge. It's used to keep things cool. And finally, water vapor. Okay, water vapor isn't the main cause of global warming, but it is an effect and contributor to it. Because of global warming, more water evaporates, so more water goes into the atmosphere, trapping even more heat near the Earth's surface. And the cycle continues. Depending on the type, greenhouse gases can stay in the atmosphere for a few years or even for thousands of years. You're probably wondering, what are some of the effects of these greenhouse gases? Well, when the Earth's temperature rises, that can cause more frequent and intense heat waves, droughts, and floods. The extra CO2 is also changing the ocean's chemistry, affecting marine animals and making it harder for them to survive. But there are ways to prevent things from getting worse. Head to cbckidsnews.ca for those details.
Some honey from Creston has become the talk of the bee world, scooping up some big prizes at the North American Honey Show.
We spoke with beekeeper Amanda Goodman-Lee about what made their honey find the sweet spot and rise to the top. They spoke to CBC Kelowna's Chris Walker earlier today.
What makes your honey so good?
I think it's so good because it's from the Kootenays. In the creamed honey division, they're looking for smoothness, creaminess. They're looking that there's no dust or any little particles or debris in the honey. You submit 4 jars in one show and 3 in the other. There's no labels on it, so it's a blind judging. And they look for fingerprints. They look at the lid. So if you have a little dent in the lid, that'll be a mark off. But most of all, it's the flavor, it's the taste, it's the creaminess. It's got to be smooth, smooth, smooth. It's really the work of the bees, and it's the greatest reward we get when we're beekeeping is at the end of season, when we're extracting that honey and that liquid gold is coming. Our honey will taste different than honey maybe in the Okanagan or the Lower Mainland, but I think it's all the things that combine the love, just the purity, raw honey of it. Fireweed honey is where there has been a clear cut or a forest fire, and it's sort of the first vegetation that grows up in on the mountains. Beekeepers were notorious for keeping our location secret and quiet. Our fireweed, which got a blue ribbon, was auctioned off. The auctioneer was also one of the honey judges, and he said that we got a perfect score on this honey. He hadn't tasted creamed honey like this in over 20 years. In his opinion, and the other judges, that it was the best to get best in show. And as the numbers were going past 250 US, the 3, 4, 5, 6, ended at 650 US a jar.
Come on.
So is your way, Ray, $650.
So when people complain to me if they think my honey prices are high, I'm gonna say, not high enough if I can sell it for $650. There is a real love for the bee. I'm always learning. The bees just teach us to be calm and cool and collected, and the reward is the honey, and it's so wonderful to talk about the beautiful side of beekeeping.
Well done, Amanda and Jeff. And before we go tonight, you have a very special birthday shout-out.
I do. It is my grandmother's 100th birthday today. So happy birthday, Nana, or in Farsi, Tavludet Mubarak, Nana.
You're a good grandson. And your grandmother's name is Bejat, is that right?
Bejat, yes.
100 years old. Wonderful.
I wore a teal pocket square just for her.
Who picked that out?
I can't say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBCGM, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.